3 o'clock on this Wednesday afternoon. Welcome aboard the Postgame Show alongside Elijah Campbell. I'm Jay Phillips. Thank you so much for being with us. A lot to get to on today's program as everybody now has started to form opinions. Dare I say it feels, at least on the social media platform formerly known as Twitter.
Yeah, it's still Twitter.
Like battle lines are being drawn. I hope it doesn't get quite that much, but I was speaking with Mr. Campbell earlier, and he had told me that there started to feel like a level of polarization over some of the larger rumors that are out there when it comes to Carolina's potential new baseball coach. We're not there yet. I have been assured by some very close to the situation that we are not there yet when it comes to a hire, or that there's even really been a full, kind of narrowing of the focus as of yet. On that note, by the way, our very good friend John Whittle of the Big Spur will join us at 4:15. Typically, we have John at 3:30. But today, Elijah and I decided that we would have John in the middle of the show to give him that much more time to find out any pertinent information to the story. So John will be coming up in about an hour and 15 minutes, and we look forward to speaking with him. Before that, as I just mentioned at the end of the halftime show, one of the best in the business to speak with and just reminisce, whatever you want to do. Our good friend Ryan McGee of ESPN, the Marty and McGee Show on the SEC Network, the author of several fantastic books. He was tweeting out a picture with him and his family at the Charlotte Knights ball game a couple nights ago, eating ice cream out of a mini helmet.
American tradition.
Sure.
Ice cream out of a mini helmet.
I liked it when I was a kid, and we got minor league ball back in Columbia when I was like 11 or 12. I didn't grow up with it in the 70s, but it came back in the early 80s. And back then, it was a Mets affiliate. But instead, like, depending on the week, they got in like a collection of different major league mini helmets. So you could get, like one night you might get the Braves, and the next night the Dodgers or the Reds or the Cubs, or, it was kind of fun to collect them, I don't think I ever got a Mets one on purpose, even as a kid. People ask me why I hate the Mets, and I don't know. I think I've said this before, and Heath Klein's wife, Mandy, and I feel the same way as lifelong Braves fans. Heath, one time we were we were down when watching a playoff game, I don't know, 10 years ago-ish, down in the Vista. And Heath asked Mandy and me at the same time, like, why do you guys hate the Mets? And we kind of looked like, I don't know, because they're the Mets. And it just, Heath could not stand that level of logic.
Well, it makes sense, though, because you're the division rival. You're not supposed to like your division rival.
But I didn't like the Mets before the Braves moved to the East. And I've said, maybe it's because the very first game I ever went to at old Fulton County as a young Jay Phillips was against the New York Mets. And maybe ever since then, I've just had a thing like, that's the team I'm supposed to pull against. I think I was...
Permanent antagonist.
Yeah, I think I was 11 the first time I went to a Braves game. But anyway, we'll talk to Ryan about all those kind of things and more. And his thoughts. We're not going to talk to Ryan about the Gamecock baseball coaching search, okay? I'll just tell you all that right now. But we'll talk to him about Gamecock baseball's place in the Southeastern Conference, how it's changing, how he views it, because he covers a lot of college baseball for ESPN, and I know he loves college baseball. But, how quickly he might look at Carolina baseball being able to recapture some of that magic regardless of who may be hired. I don't know. And we'll get his thoughts on this weekend's Supers and some things like that. But Ryan's coming up at the bottom of the hour. Look, let's go ahead and jump in. I don't want to move too far away from any of the storylines. Last night, I know John Whittle put it out. There were others who maybe ran with it. Yours truly got a couple of inklings as well, that Monty Lee was rising, if not to the very top of the list, certainly amongst a potentially narrowed list. And I don't know how large or long the list was when Coach Tanner got started, okay? We've talked about some of the names. And really, the interesting part, Elijah, is that from a national perspective, three of the best names that could be available for almost any premier coaching job are all currently employed in the state of North Carolina. So they're very close to you in Tom Walter, Chris Pollard, and Cliff Godwin. And that's convenient. I'm beginning, and I can't fully confirm, but I'm beginning to hear whispers that conversations with Walter, at least with Walter's camp, have taken place. He's got a big buyout, and he makes a lot of money. It may simply be that one is one Carolina can't approach. And that gets us, by the way, into part of the philosophical discussion, which I'll come back around to in just a minute. I don't know as much about Pollard's buyout situation, but these are men that you're going to have to pay seven figures to lure from their current gig. I think Walter's already making more than $1 million. Pollard is close to it, and Cliff Godwin makes $600,000. If you want to get Dan McDonnell out of Louisville, probably going to cost you about $1.5 million. I don't know what his buyout situation is. I got a hunch that, and this is just me talking, okay? I got a hunch that if you wanted to get Dan McDonnell, you could work with the University of Louisville and make some things happen. That he's been there a long time. I'm also told, though, with Dan McDonnell, and we've had a couple of guests this week tell us this, he may be someone who doesn't necessarily embrace a lot of what's going on in the modern world when it comes to NIL and the transfer portal. Well, if he doesn't, but he's a hell of a baseball coach, find staffers who will. There's ways to work through some of those problems. But that comes back around to something, and I've had a couple of you hit me on Twitter, and I'm doing my best, like others that cover these things, to try and capture some of the truth. But you don't want to be perceived as doing this solely for financial reasons. In other words, look, let me say it like this. Let's look, because there's a lot of people out there. It's not hard to find, Elijah. There's a lot of people out there who are skeptical of Coach Tanner's hiring of late. When it comes to baseball, he's hired two and he's had to fire two. When it came to football, you hired Coach Beamer, and he was basically, if not the lowest paid coach in the conference, the second lowest paid coach in the conference. Now he's more in the middle of the pack because he's had a couple of good years. Last year was not, but you've identified what's wrong, and you're hoping to correct it primarily through recruiting. Lamont had a good year. He was hired. Let's face it, he was one of the two or three lowest paid coaches. Now he, too, gets a nice bump, and he's in the middle, probably upper half, right, but right in the middle. But he got a nice raise. Go do the work, and you'll be rewarded for it. The difference in my conversations, whether it's with fans, whether it's with people that do what you and I do, those around the sport of baseball, is that South Carolina football and South Carolina men's basketball, from a national perspective, are not viewed the way South Carolina baseball is. It wasn't all that long ago that South Carolina baseball was literally the best program in America. Hands down. No argument. Now it's in the bottom third of the Southeastern Conference. And that's sitting badly with a lot of people. That's how it feels. It might not really be in the bottom third, but you could make a case.
Standings.
Yeah.
The standings reflect. You finished 10th out of 14 teams in the SEC.
That's bottom third.
Yeah. I don't think you're far off on that at all. So I'd say it's a very accurate
certainly assessment. In the second half, right? Certainly in the second half.
You're certainly not in the top half if we were to eliminate that.
And so that's why people look at it differently. And that's why this fan base wants to believe that this school will do whatever it takes to get that program back on top. And I was having some conversations this morning, and I reflected on this with you. About 20 years ago-ish, South Carolina had just finished, let's say 20 years ago now, Carolina was about to go to its third straight College World Series. In 2002, they played for the national title. 2003 wasn't quite as good a trip, but you went. You won. I think you only won once. And then in 2004, you finished technically, I know it's kind of how you do the math, but kind of third. You didn't advance to the title series, but really you were sort of the last
game away from the title series.
Yeah, you were the last team eliminated. Call it third or fourth if you want. And at that time, as Ray Tanner asked for the things that needed to be done to continue the program on the trajectory it was there, and it was a few years before they went back. Let's make no mistake. But it got done. You ultimately got the ballpark built. A little bit of a delay with the land and things like that, which was very unfortunate. I still believe they should have built it somewhere else, but that's a story for another day. But you got the ballpark built. You were able to lure Chad Holbrook from Chapel Hill. You were able to amass a fantastic roster. And again, you became the best program in America. Back-to-back national titles, played for a third. And the following year, for what it's worth, in Chad's first year, you went to the Supers again. So you were still, and you were right there. You were right there. And then since then, it's begun its slide for whatever reasons. And there are a multitude of reasons. But the fans want to see this school treat that sport the way it used to be treated. And I do think it's a fair question to ask. Is that level of support there now? Is that going to happen? You don't need a new ballpark again. And you and I had somebody say, hey, y'all are making too much of a big deal about some of the things around the ballpark. No, we're really not. We've been told by those around it that it could use some enhancements. Again, you're not trying to reinvent the wheel, but time flows right by you, and others in the league, the best baseball league in America, are doing it. You've got to keep up like any other sport. But this is your sport. Dawn notwithstanding. But let's be perfectly honest, y'all. Dawn has made Dawn's program what it is. That's all Dawn Staley. And she's a mega rock star. But before her, there were only pockets of success in women's basketball. Susan's teams made a Elite Eight. Pam Parsons back in the day. Nancy Wilson had some good runs. Martha Parker was a hell of a player. But you weren't this. But baseball, you went to the World Series in the 70s. You went to the World Series in the 80s. In the 90s, you slipped a little bit as you joined the Southeastern Conference. But then you hired that young up-and-coming guy from NC State named Ray Tanner. And he rather quickly built you a roster that 5 years after he got hired was basically the best team in America. Because you gave him the resources to go get it done. And I'm not saying it's not being done right now, but that's the number one overarching theme, Elijah. Is this school going to commit to the sport the way it did for Coach Tanner, to get him here, to elevate him, and then when you hit sort of you bump the ceiling a little bit, are you ready to burst through it? And this school said, yes, we're ready to burst through it, and they did it. Will they do it again? That's the question.
And that's what it's going to have to take. And it's going to be it's going to take a lot more than what you did for Ray, because that type of stuff is like facilities. It's, certain things that he might want here and there that he might have had at NC State that he would like to have seen here. And he got it. It's a much bigger task now, considering you're having to allocate money for a settlement and House and NCAA there, and everybody's going to have to do. And this isn't a unique issue to South Carolina, but also NIL, along with being able to upgrade your facilities. A hire like this it's important for the reasons we've discussed this week, because of where you're at in the SEC and where you're getting passed by in the SEC. And oh, by the way, Oklahoma, Texas coming in. They're pretty good at the whole baseball thing, especially Texas.
Yes.
But now it's gotten to the point where you're going to have to make a splash on this hire and be able to prove to whoever you're bringing in, whether it be promoting Monty or whether it's, Godwin, whoever, that you're going to be able to provide them the resources to be able to compete in this mega conference that is going to be it still is the juggernaut of the sport. That's a lot to have to be able to commit. And that's, if you're serious about winning in college baseball in this conference, you are going to have to fork over a lot for everything that we just mentioned, if you're serious about doing it.
Yeah. We'll talk about that polarization that I mentioned a little bit earlier. Elijah's got today's poll question out there. And again, we'll break away and have a little fun before we get back into the seriousness with our buddy Ryan McGee of ESPN coming up in just a little bit. It's the Wednesday postgame show. It's raining in downtown Columbia right now. Rain last night, rain yesterday. Grass growth is up, according to our buddy Ben Cato, more than 125% over last year. That means lots of mowing to be done. Ben and his staff remind you at Cato's, be patient. Cutting wet grass can cause a lot of damage to your mower. He says they like to sell replacement parts. They don't mind, but they'd rather you take care of your lawnmower the old-fashioned way by being patient in the rain. But if you do need service, the Cato Service Department ready to help you out. They've also got mower rental. So, like, say you haven't cut the grass in a long time. Maybe you've got, like, an empty lot. You can rent a push mower. They'll be happy to do that for you. That way you don't mess up your own stuff quite as much. Only $50 a day. And, of course, now a lot of battery-powered push mowers as well. Stop in and see all they can do for you, whether you cut your own grass, whether you do it for a living. 4012 West Beltline Boulevard, and always online. That's our good friends at Cato's Power Equipment, catospowerequipment.com. Twenty minutes after 3 o'clock Wednesday afternoon. Welcome back into the Postgame Show. Jay Phillips, Elijah Campbell with you. I was going to put the Braves game on in here, but they're already losing 6-0 in the seventh. So I was like, eh.
You should have known they were going to lose.
I know. That's what you said yesterday.
Based off our trend. I'm mad at myself. I didn't look to see what time of the game it was, what time the game was today.
Yeah.
Because I was going to make maybe make a call.
1:30 getaway game today at Fenway.
when I saw they get that Atlanta won last night, I was like, you know what? Got to make a call. Boston's going to win tomorrow. That's how they are.
Braves rookie Spencer Schwellenbach pitched again today, but didn't do enough.
His name does just sound like a movie villain name.
Yeah, it does, man. Like if they had made Die Hard 5, he'd be the guy.
If they did what they did with the Rocky movies and just started like beating in, sequels into the ground and just kept beating that dead
Apollo
horse.
Creed, Clubber Lang, Ivan Drago, Spencer Schwellenbach. Yeah. Well, anyway, we'll see what happens. But Braves losing.
Classic.
I looked. I haven't looked in a few days, by the way, and I did today, and I was really disappointed. The Braves are a week out of first, man. They're 7 games back.
Oof.
I say a week out in the sense that if you went on a 7-game win streak and the Phillies went on a 7-game losing streak, you'd be tied for first.
The ultimate week. They're an ultimate week out.
So,
it would take, that would take a lot.
So I mean, I'm not saying they're done because
they're not cooked. Plenty of time.
I've seen them be 10 back and still win the division in July. So I've seen that happen. It's doable.
Really, all you need is just get to the playoffs.
Yeah,
that's really all that matters, and I think they're going to do that.
Yeah, they'll get to the playoffs. You got another poll question today. Do you want to give yesterday's results so we can kind of set this up, and then we'll get today's in? Is that a good way to do this?
That's
okay.
I would say, Jay, that's the best way to do this.
Thank you.
So that's why, pulling up yesterday's because it's finally finished. We got 709 votes. Great participation here because we want a good sample size. All right, it's science. But yesterday, our bracket won.
Science.
It's science.
Yeah, that's an air quote.
Air quote. Science and math. This is education. But yesterday's bracket, we had 3 candidates, and it was Tom Walter from Wake Forest, Cliff Godwin from East Carolina, Monty Lee. Cliff Godwin ended up winning that poll by 5%. He got 40% of the vote, Monty Lee 35%, Tom Walter 25%. So in a couple days, we'll include Cliff Godwin in the final poll. Today, the 3 candidates we have chosen, Chris Pollard from Duke, Dan McDonald from Louisville, Josh Elander, Tennessee assistant.
Okay.
And we are 301 votes in, so decent sample size.
Right.
And barely, with a slim lead, Chris Pollard from Duke, 37.2%, Josh Elander, 36.9%. A little further back is Dan McDonald from Louisville at 25.9%.
The Elander one gets interesting. I'd vote in this one today. I'd vote Pollard.
Okay.
I know I've said for a while, go get Dan McDonald. The more research I've done of late, the more I've really kind of just taken a liking to what Chris Pollard is doing and where he's doing it.
I voted McDonald before you shared your intel with me, and I wish I could retract my vote.
Well, I'm hearing Dan McDonald just is not as on board with some of the newest things that are happening in college baseball. And look, we saw Coach Gilmore the other day go on a little mini rant about NIL, but
I got thoughts on that.
But here's the thing: it's here. You don't have to like it.
Yeah,
I appreciate those that don't. Again, I even believe that what NIL is today is not what I believed NIL was going to be. Because it has, whether they want to call it that or not, it has in a lot of ways become a pay-for-play kind of thing. And that's unfortunate. But I'm not surprised because that's the free market.
Well, it was a gateway to right or wrong that's been happening forever.
But that maybe, again, maybe Dan is not as on board. Or maybe his school's not as on board. Maybe it's a combination of both. But it sounds to me from some of the conversations I've had like Dan McDonald just doesn't embrace that the way others will do.
Those who win do? Yeah, those who win in this era.
And there again, what is South Carolina limited relative to some other schools? One of the things about it, and this isn't a lamentation per se, but you look at a school like LSU. I've said this before. You look at a school like Tennessee. What do they have in common in their state? They don't have, if you will, a true in-state rival.
Mm-hmm.
The majority of the fans in the state support Big State U. Now that doesn't have to be a limitation all the time, but this is a small state. Carolina and Clemson can only go so far, And Carolina has more fans than Clemson does, but Clemson has a passionate fan base. Again, Carolina's probably got twice as many living alumni and all that kind of thing, But again, I'm not here to sit here and talk about the nuances of the fan bases.
Love the emphasis on living alumni.
Yeah. Well,
hard to donate, and
I would say Carolina probably has more deceased alumni as well, simply because it's a larger school.
Yes, and they've been around for a while. Yeah. So, but I like the clarification.
Thank you. Anyway, but they don't have that, right? They don't have competition, so more of the money can go into those kind of things. Now, again, that's not an end all be all, but it's part of the equation. And does Carolina, whoever comes in here, are you going to be able to compete? Maybe not directly with dollar for dollar, but enough to put a quality, offer out on the table for a lot of these kids. I think you'll be able to do that. And you better embrace it to some degree regardless. Otherwise, you may as well quit, right? I mean, and I don't think you can do it halfway. So that needs to be part of the interview process, whether it's Ray Tanner at South Carolina this week, whether it's whomever is looking for a coach. I don't care who it is. Gary Gilmore didn't embrace it, and Coastal was still pretty good. Will the next coach? Because Coastal fans, listen, again, they're a national champion 8 years ago.
National brand now.
There's an expectation level over there.
And they got in the NCAA tournament. They shouldn't have, but they got in.
But they were there, and then they won a game.
They did.
So they beat the hell out of Vanderbilt, man. They beat by 10, right?
The fraud Madors. And then Vanderbilt lost a high point.
Yeah, so I like Pollard, but to come back around to Elander, and again, one of the stories today, and we'll talk about this with John Whittle in a little bit, is Monty Lee kind of rising to the top. Now, Monty's not. Monty has most recently been an assistant, but he's been a head coach at Charleston. He's been a head coach at Clemson. He did go to one super regional at Charleston, and he was in the playoffs enough times at Clemson, but the last couple of years they didn't make it, and ultimately he was let go. But if you're going to go that route, and I'm not saying you should, because I've already made it clear who I think they should, the kind of coach I think they should target. Again, Tom Walter and Chris Pollard would be 1A, 1B for me. I've made that abundantly clear. But if you're going to go and get somebody that's quote up and coming or whatever, and Monty may be a little bit different, well, you better give Elander a long look.
Well, that's my thing. If you're going to go the assistant route, you go for the best one. And, ask anybody at Tennessee. I've read a lot of things where sources around the Tennessee program have been highly complimentary about Elander being a vital part to their success. And if that's true, he's a vital part of success to a team that's been the national 1 seed twice in the last 3 years. That means a lot. Their record the last 2 of those years is just insane.
I don't think it's a lot different, Elijah, than what Chad Holbrook provided South Carolina when he came down from Chapel Hill. Mm-hmm. Chad gave him that extra little, push as both an assistant coach and as a recruiter. And that's what Elander does. So it's something to think about. We got a lot more to get into with this. Hit the 107.5 The Game Twitter feed and vote on the poll. Send us your thoughts, 803-404-6100 on the Firehouse Subs text line. We'll get to those. We'll talk bigger picture stuff, baseball-wise, with our buddy Ryan McGee of ESPN. Always a pleasure to talk to Ryan. He joins us when the postgame show continues. We've been talking Gamecock baseball as Ray Tanner leads the search for a new baseball coach. And here to tell us that he has accepted the job is ESPN's Ryan McGee.
Congrats.
Knew you were looking for something new.
Yeah.
How are you, sir?
I appreciate you breaking the news, man. It's a big deal. I'm excited to come down there. You know, my daughter's already in school there, so I'm just going to move in with her, which I haven't told her yet. So this is all going to go great.
The kids will love that. When you look at this program, and it's always great to have you. Thank you for your time, sir. We do appreciate it. You know, you've grown up around here. You live in Charlotte now, and you know what Gamecock baseball means. But it's slipped, Ryan, and now to the point where even though you make the tournament, you fire the head coach. As you kind of take a 30,000-foot look, you know, what do you see now, and how does Carolina turn this around?
Well, the problem is comparison, because you know. When Carolina baseball had it rolling, and of course I'm talking about all the College World Series appearances, and when Ray was coaching and all that, when they had it rolling, the reality was that the SEC was kind of in its formative stage when it comes to college baseball as to what it is now. I mean, listen, LSU was LSU, and you know other teams, you know Florida was Florida, but other teams would kind of get on a run, you know. Arkansas might be good for a few years, then it go away. You know, Texas A&M might be good for a couple of years, and then it would take time off. Now everyone's good. I mean, there's a possibility of an all ACC versus SEC College World Series because all the teams. Listen, Kentucky is phenomenal at baseball. Yeah. That's not a sentence I've ever uttered before. When Kentucky spent $30 million on a baseball stadium, we all thought they were nuts because they still have never been to Omaha. So the point is, it's a much more crowded field and a much more difficult comparison measuring stick, you know, than it was. So you know, not that long ago, you know, making the tournament is a sign of turning things around, and you know, certainly that team got going a couple times this year, and it looked like it was making the turn. But you know, when Tennessee and Kentucky and Arkansas and you know everyone else, Florida and everyone else are moving on, and you're not, then you know that becomes difficult to swallow. And comparison is the thief of joy, and it also is the thief of jobs.
Yeah, certainly. We're living proof of that right now. Ryan, you know, you mentioned the possibility of an all SEC, ACC College World Series, and clearly those are the two best conferences in America. And, you know, if you just look at like the gambling odds right now of the teams in the super regionals, Tennessee, Texas A&M, two pretty heavy favorites to win the whole thing. But who was maybe a team that, you know, the national media might not be talking about as much, but you watch them and you're like, man, that's a scary team, want no part of them.
Kentucky is the answer because they've been good all year. You know, they're a national seed. They're a top 5 team, and no one's talking about them. I mean, Kentucky fans are killing me today because, you know, the television schedule came out for the super regionals, and, you know, the Kentucky games are on at 9 o'clock Eastern on ESPNU. And, you know, the Kentucky fans are taking that as a slight, and I don't blame them for doing that, but they're not a brand name yet. They take care of their business like they should. But I just think they're sneaky good. You know, we spend a lot of time. So you guys know when we're on the road doing Marty McGee in the fall, they set us up in offices on campus, you know, production offices, kind of impromptu deal. And, you know, we're in administration buildings and we're in classrooms and all this. You know, at Carolina, we're right there on the Horseshoe in one of those super old, you know, the only way they would ever let me in the Honors College, right, is to go work in a temporary office on the Horseshoe. But in Kentucky, they set us up in the baseball stadium. And it's that brand new $30 million facility I'm talking about, which kind of sits on the hill overlooking the football stadium. And as a result, I spent a lot of time with that baseball team the last couple of years because we've been to Kentucky. I think we went there twice last year. And so I see it up close, and I see what they're doing. So that's a super, super dangerous team. And listen, I have warned all my people in Knoxville, Evansville has 2 really good pitchers. And as you guys know, if you've got 2 really good starters, then you can get to Omaha. And Tennessee is one of those programs that has had a lot of success over the last 10 years, but has always been one of those, why aren't they better at baseball than they are? And the reality is they've had number 1 teams that have not taken care of business. And so I think that Evansville trip up to Knoxville has potential to be very, very dangerous. Ask East Carolina about that.
Talking to our good friend Ryan McGee, of course, SEC Network, Marty McGee throughout the course of the years. He was talking about there and covering NASCAR, college baseball, and so much more. Terrific author. Y'all know all that. He lives in Charlotte. Let me get your take on two names and just programs. You mentioned Kentucky. Just your thoughts on what Tom Walter's doing at Wake Forest, what Chris Pollard is doing at Duke. Also, two schools that a few years ago you just said, wait, do they even have a baseball team?
Yeah, and then that staff at Wake Forest I've spent time with over the years, and Tom Walters is an all-time baseball guy. I did a story for East 60 almost a decade ago about Tom Walters donating his kidney to a freshman outfielder on his team who the kid was dying, and they couldn't find a match within his family. And Tom Walter was like, well, let me take the test. And lo and behold, the head baseball coach gave his player, Kevin Jordan, a kidney, and they're still great friends to this day. The funniest part about that, sidebar, by the way, he literally called the NCAA and was like, can I do this? Is this an improper benefit? I don't care if it is. Yeah, I don't care if it is. I just want you to know. Yeah, but that's the guy Tom Walter is. Yeah, and so to see them turn the corner, and, I was there last year. I've been going to Omaha, on and off for 20 years. That's the best college baseball game I ever saw, was that Wake Forest LSU game a year ago. And I know Wake Forest fans are disappointed that they're no longer playing this year. But yeah, and then at Duke. And you guys know I grew up in the right area. Yeah. And so I would go to games at Duke, and, it would be 9 of us. Me, my dad, my brother, and the girlfriends, right? Maybe one scout sitting in the grandstand. This is back in the 80s and 90s. And so, yeah, to turn those two programs around, to me it's hope for everyone else, because if you know how to acquire players, and Wake Forest and Duke have gotten really good at being on the receiving end of the transfer portal, and you're coached up well, and it's a great environment, you can turn it around. So it's hope for a South Carolina who, by the way, has all the tools and has all the facilities and has all the history that Duke and Wake Forest did not. And so the opportunity to turn around quickly in college baseball, I think, is still there.
And, where you're from in North Carolina, you're familiar with East Carolina's baseball program, how good it's been over the last little bit. And one of the names that's floated around for the South Carolina job is Cliff Godwin, and it's a name that's been popular with the fans here. But this year with the Evansville situation, with them punching their ticket to the Supers, it looks like ECU just found another way not to get to Omaha in another creative fashion. But what do you think of that ECU program, what Cliff's been able to do there, and why do you think they haven't just been able to get that little extra bit further to break through to the College World Series?
So full disclosure, my dad was a pitcher for East Carolina. In fact, he pitched for East Carolina in the NAIA College World Series. That's the only College World Series East Carolina's ever been to. They are easily, I don't think it's even a discussion, they're the best college baseball program in the history of the game that's never made it to Omaha. Everybody's at least made it once, right? Maine has made it, right? Harvard has made it. Hawaii has made it. East Carolina has hosted multiple super regionals over the last decade and has not gotten there. All that being said, if South Carolina was – now the trick is Godwin is a local boy. Grew up there. I mean, he is an Eastern North Carolina guy. And so to lure him away.
Oh. Did we just lose Ryan?
I think we lost him.
See if he can get him back. We'll hit a break. Let's see if we can get Ryan back and finish that thought, because now we're going to have to talk barbecue or something. All right. Yeah, we'll get Ryan. We lost him. We'll get him back on the other side of the break. This is the Postgame Show. All right, welcome back in, and our buddy Ryan McGee is with us. We lost him there for a second. It's raining here. I don't know if it's raining where you are, so we just lost you on the cell tower there for a minute. But thank you, sir, for coming back on with us. We were discussing Cliff Godwin and him being a guy from Eastern North Carolina. That's where we lost you, Ryan. So I'll let you finish that story. Then I've got another thought about how we can make him feel at home should he choose to come. But you go with your part first, sir.
Well, what I was going to say I was going to say that, Cliff's an East Carolina guy. He was, born and raised right around the corner from campus, and he loves that place. But, I think that South Carolina's best option is going to be a coach like that, or maybe look toward Louisville, or maybe look toward some other places that can't quite seem to get over the hump, right? They've got all the resources. They got the passionate fan base. They got all those things. But, if you're Godwin, you have to start asking, can we get there? Because the guy can coach baseball, and he can recruit. His team, I was up there earlier this year, that team is so loaded. And so the question is this as far as he can carry that bucket? And as much as he would love to get the Pirates to Omaha finally, maybe it's time to move to a place with the resources to do that. Now, I know Ole Miss has talked about that name. There's a lot of – his name's attached to a lot of teams, a lot of games, a lot of teams, a lot of programs. But Chris Pollard, you mentioned, Tom Walter – Dan McDonald's, who I was thinking about at Louisville. So, maybe you go after a guy that's like, all right, I've taken this as far as I can take it. So why not take my chances in the SEC, which is the, completely non-disputed best college baseball conference in the land, and also a place that's led by a baseball coach in Randy Tanner and is willing to, tap into the resources. So,
well, how does Ray Tanner, and I'm serious, Ryan, let's face it, let's look at Ray Tanner's trajectory. Where did he play college baseball? At NC State. Where did he coach? NC State. And he left for South Carolina. He needs to tell Cliff that story, right?
Yeah, and Cliff knows that story. I said I grew up in Raleigh.
Yeah.
And, and Tanner and I talk about it all the time, about the fact that, I would sit in the grandstands and watch top 15 baseball teams when Tanner was an assistant coach and then when he was a head coach, and that was his school. And I didn't think there was any way he'd ever leave. But there has never been anyone that has enjoyed where he lives and the job that he has more than Ray Tanner has in Columbia, South Carolina. And so that you're exactly right. That's the story. And he is Tanner is still he is a demigod in the college baseball community. And so if he calls, you got to answer. And again, you hear Godwin talk, who he sounds like? He sounds like Ray. Because Ray sounds like me, because we're all from down east. And so they definitely speak the language. And South Carolina is not a hard sell. It's just a matter of finding the person that the timing is right.
Yeah. Well, what I was going to say is we may be known around these parts for mustard-based barbecue sauce, but there's plenty of vinegar sauce, man. So Eastern North Carolina.
You bring it with you. I'm living proof that if you move to South Carolina from North Carolina, you can bring sauce with you. They don't stop you at the border like I was told.
No, there's a couple places that'll make it for you too. There's a couple places that have some good vinegar sauce around here. So
you gotta look. But once you find my daughter, I told her you gotta look. But once you find it, you find it.
Yeah, it's there. They even have Alabama sauce here, man. There's places home team.
Yeah,
you can get
that's mayonnaise, but that's a whole other conversation.
I get it.
Sounds like contraband.
Yeah, no, it's not terrible, but it's not great either. But that's a story for another day. I will ask you this: why does ice cream taste better in a baseball logoed mini helmet?
It just does, man. Maybe it's the nostalgia thing. All I know is I posted that earlier this week. It was a Charlotte Knights game, and my family got ice cream, and my wife got it in just a regular old cup, and my daughter and I got it in a helmet, and we actually made my wife taste this, see if it tastes any different. She's like, it does. I go, I know. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the chemicals in the plastic. I don't care. It's like I got Marty. Marty Smith refuses to put any chemicals in his body.
Right.
And that's why he only drinks black coffee for Starbucks or whatever. He and I were driving to Atlanta one year, and I was like, dude, we have to get coffee. I'm not driving 15 minutes out of the way to go to Starbucks. We're going to the Quick Trip. And we went to the Quick Trip, and I got him a QT Cappuccino or whatever the thing is, French vanilla. And I'm like, dude, just drink that. He goes, it's got chemicals in it. I go, yeah, and they're delicious. And they were, and he loved it. So yeah, that's how I feel. If it's the plastic from the hat, I don't care. Somewhere I have a box full of plastic baseball caps from minor league ballparks that I don't ever throw anything away unless my wife threw it away and I don't know it.
Yeah. No. And if y'all hadn't read Ryan's book from a couple of summers ago about his experience working for the Asheville Tourists, you need to go pick that up wherever you buy your books. There's a lot of good stuff in there. I know it was at the beginning of it, and I read the whole thing, but in fact, I read it twice, but including Ryan and the soft serve machine. But that's later in the book. But
yeah, almost killed me. But
yeah.
That's how much I love soft serve at the ballpark. Is that I almost died because of the machine, and I still can't not eat it.
Have you ever gotten Marty? And I've texted Ryan shamelessly that I want to be on the Star Wars podcast that he's a part of from time to time. But has Marty been on that? Does Marty know anything about Star Wars?
Marty doesn't know anything. Like Marty, he and I were on a Zoom call earlier today, and the backdrop in my office is almost exclusively Star Wars because that our Never Tell Me the Odds podcast I do with Clinton Yates and Ardo Cal. That's the backdrop for when we do our podcast. And and Marty does. I can see Marty's eyes moving around like I don't even know what any of this is. So I mean, he knows the basics. I mean, he's a kid of the '80s. He knows who Luke Skywalker and Yoda and Han Solo are, but past that, he can't. He doesn't have any. He thinks the acolyte is some kid that works at church.
Well, it sounds like that. I didn't watch that last night, but I do want to watch the.
So good.
Yeah, I know. I want to watch that. They're going way back in the Star Wars.
It's like kung fu with lightsabers.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. I got less than a minute to go here. Is Ryan McGee? I'm sure he is working on something new for us to be reading, whether it's a feature article or may I ask a new book.
I'm literally, as we speak, I'm working. I'm glad you asked the college baseball questions because tomorrow I'll have a story up, the 10 things you need to watch for during the Super Regional round that starts this weekend in the college baseball tournament. All right. So, yeah, 10 things. And some of it's very serious and some of it is not, but that shouldn't surprise you.
That sounds very Ryan McGee. Thank you for the extra time, sir. Glad your daughter's enjoying Columbia. We'll see you here soon enough, I know, for a football game, and I'm sure at media days and beyond. But always appreciate it, man. Good stuff.
Appreciate it, guys.
You bet. That is Ryan McGee, ESPN McGee. To follow along, catch Marty McGee on the SEC Network. More on Carolina's baseball search. See if we can find some chemicals to eat.
I'm all about putting chemicals in my body. I'm the anti-Marty Smith.
I love chemicals, man. Like
I can't get enough.
Like I don't know what the blue stuff is or red stuff is in an icy, but I love it.
Addicted to chemicals.
Time to tell you about Dr. Dan Balknight and his team at the Men's Clinic. Also time for me to pay attention to the fact that I have a job to do here. I was sitting here starting to read my next article.
That's why you need to go to the Men's Clinic.
That is.
That's why you need to see Dr. Dan Balknight.
Brain fog, it happens.
Symptom.
I am living, breathing proof right now, but too often guys won't go to the doctor when they're feeling off, whether it's because they think they'll just tough it out. I'll be fine. Just like my dad and my granddad back in the day, or you just don't want to talk about it. Maybe you feel a little embarrassed. Guys aren't supposed to talk about things that bother them. Don't be that guy. Get to feeling better after you see Dr. Dan Balknight and his team at the Men's Clinic. They will sit down with you. You'll talk with Dan one-on-one. He'll get to the bottom of what's going on, talk about what your life's all about, figure things out, get you back to feeling like yourself again. They're experts in healthcare for men dedicated to making you feel better. 803-875-MENS and online at themensclinicsc.com. 4 o'clock on this Wednesday afternoon. Welcome back into the Postgame Show alongside Elijah Campbell. I'm Jay Phillips. Appreciate you being with us. Thanks once again to our buddy Ryan McGee of ESPN for joining us. Always appreciate his time. Fun stuff. And, you know, he had a nice message there for Carolina fans. This is still a premier destination, and this is a guy who covers college baseball and has for a huge portion of his career. I know our buddy Brad Crawford was echoing that, Brad of 24/7 Sports, that it's still seen. David Cloninger the other day, you know, look, around the country, this is still seen as one of those jobs, but it's, for whatever reason, fallen on hard times. Yeah, and even those hard times are relative. I mean, in the 12 years since you last went to Omaha, because COVID year doesn't count, you did miss the tournament 4 times. But it isn't like you missed it 8 times and only went 4 times. You've been to 4 super regionals. But you were going almost every year for, 12 or 13 years.
It was what, Ray went 10 and 14?
Something like that.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's hard right now for Carolina baseball fans to look around. And like Ryan said, when you look at Tennessee and especially Kentucky and you see what they're doing, it's hard because, like he said, it used to ebb and flow for a few schools, right? I mean, Coach Burtman built LSU into what it was basically from the ground up baseball-wise, late 80s and into the 90s, and they became the power of college baseball. Texas has never really gone anywhere, but they're not in the SEC, but they're coming in. Yeah, but Texas is always good. Again, there's people that really a little upset with their current coach, and he's been to Omaha 3 times in 8 years. And he's maybe just not quite good enough for Texas.
That's how high the standard is there.
You know, they expect Texas goes in believing they should be in Omaha every year. And that's fair. LSU fans think that, right? And I don't know if Carolina fans think that, but Carolina fans certainly think super regional most of the time. And that's perfectly fair. Because, again, my standard, as I've said before, you should expect to host in the NCAA tournament here every year. That should be your minimum level of expectation, that this program should always be one of the top 16 and good enough to host. Again, you won't always hit that mark. Sometimes things go against you. LSU went on the road this year. You know, Vanderbilt went on the road this year. Florida went on the road this year. Texas went on the road. Texas went to A&M. You know, it's
a 3 seed.
Right. You know, it happens. Sometimes you're going to have a hiccup along the way. But you never should let go of your expectation. And even next year, whoever comes in, whether it's an established coach who's been to the College World Series or whether it's someone who's never been a head coach in his life, the expectation on that person's shoulders will instantly be you need to host in the first round of the NCAA tournament. You can't let go of that level of expectation. But who can you get? Again, as I've said, and we'll talk to John Whittle here in just a few minutes. So this is going to be a short opening segment, so we have as much time as possible with John on the other side of the break. He'll give us the very latest on what he's hearing about potential candidates. I want Elijah to go ahead and pull up the poll question. We'll get into that for you too. But yeah, I mentioned this to open the show. You know, it's interesting, and I was just looking, and I'm always careful, because Twitter is not the greatest gauge of the entire fan base. I am a believer, as someone is in his early 50s and studied politics, I'm a big believer in what President Nixon once called the silent majority, where there's the bulk of people that are out there just going about their day, going about their business. And yes, they care. Yes, they're in tune, but they may not always be the ones that are going to be vocal. It's not that they're happy with what's happening, and if I come now specifically to Carolina baseball, but as we all know in life, and we've seen, the dare I say, angriest are often the ones that are most vocal. And in this case, it's not just anger. There's frustration, there's tension, there's angst, however you want to label it. And there is some anger. There's no question. Some of it is pointed directly at Ray Tanner. Hey, Ray Tanner, you built this program into what it was, and now you're letting this happen. Others blame Mark Kingston and nobody but Mark Kingston. There's a lot of people on here right now, from what I can tell. Monty Lee is a good choice. Don't worry about what he didn't do at Clemson. It's what he can do at Carolina, because he's a good recruiter and he loves the state and he loves the school and he loves Ray and Ray loves him. And there's others that are like, why in God's name would you hire someone that your rival fired 2 years ago? And within 2 years, the new guy got the same type of talent back into the Super Regionals for the first time in 14 years. All are valid points. And that's the point you made to me earlier, polarizing. That right there, the polarization of this particular vacancy at this particular time is not necessarily something I foresaw. And I don't know if that's on me, but I know this program well. I know the people running it well. I know this school well, this town well, this state well. And I didn't think, look, when somebody, listen, I said on Monday, right, not a cause for celebration. You just had to fire a coach, even though you made the postseason. Not necessarily like, yay. Celebrating is when you do good stuff. This was not good. But I thought perhaps there'd be some greater level, Elijah, of unification to rally around, and then you start to hear these things. And again, with all due respect, the one name that I just think is, I get it, but I've said Landon Powell is not ready for this job.
No.
If Landon wants to go be the coach at Winthrop or Citadel, or if they hire him as an assistant, that's cool. He's not ready to run this program.
He's not a possibility.
Yeah. Monty could run the program. But I was speaking to somebody earlier today, and the conversation kind of rolled around to, it's not, and we said this yesterday, I think, but I want to say it again, and then I want your thoughts. It's not about Monty if Monty gets hired. And I know that's weird. Like, well, Jay, of course it is. The conversation went to, it might represent what some fans would see as some level of raising of a white flag in today's SEC. It's not that Monty can't coach. Monty can coach. But if that's going to be looked at from some as the, and I'm air quoting here, the best that Ray Tanner can do, what signal might that send? Now, again, I'm not saying that is what's happening. But as I look here today on Twitter and see, I mean, again, it's weird, man. It's like Monty's ready to go. And others, why in the hell would you hire Monty? And there seems to be no middle ground.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, if Monty was never on this staff, it might be different. Because the biggest thing, like if Monty is the guy that ends up getting hired, I would have to personally be really talked into it in terms of getting really on board if I were a Gamecock fan, solely because if you fire Mark Kingston to get the assistant coach on a staff that wasn't getting it done in your eyes, it seems just counterintuitive. It seems like you made a change for the sake of making a change. And I think a lot of Gamecock fans feel that way. If you're making a change because you can't get out of regionals or do it on a consistent basis, then looking at Monty's track record at Clemson and then looking at what he did as your recruiting coordinator and hitting coach, which are two very vital roles when it comes to the assembling of a coaching staff in the SEC, then it feels like you're going to recycle this.
Yeah.
You're going to put yourself back in a cycle of maybe some good regular seasons, maybe some up and down regular seasons, and the occasional trip to Supers. I think the fan base is tired of the occasional trip to Supers. They would like for it to be more of an annual thing. And it's nothing against Monty, because I think Monty's a fine coach. The thing is, in any sport, hiring the assistant on the staff that you didn't think was getting it done does make it feel like the effort isn't being made to bring in true change. And when it comes to the polarization, I get why people are on board, because he is the ultimate coach of South Carolina in terms of where he's been and the success he's had. And from what I've been hearing too, that if this isn't the place, he could very well be the coach of the Citadel next year. Yep. Which means he would have made his rounds at almost every, his bingo card is almost full when it comes to coaching at schools in the state of South Carolina. Right. And I was talking to a friend of mine today that played for him at College of Charleston that I met in Nashville. Loves the guy. Loves him. He said he's absolutely pulling for him, and I totally get it. but the polarization just comes from a fan base that it's half emotionally wanting the guy that loves you and that loves the area to be the coach, and half of somebody or fans looking at it and not wanting more of what they've had. The reason you're in the spot and the reason you were upset with Mark Kingston is because you're just not getting there. And this would feel like this is just a recycling, which I totally understand. I'm actually, if I were a Gamecock fan, I would be in that camp. I would need serious talking into to be juiced about that hire. In all honesty, just because you just don't want to end up having the same conversation in 4 or 5 years.
I think that faction of the fan base that you just described, it goes back to the point I made in the last hour. That's the faction of the fan base, and I don't know how big it is. It's hard to measure as we said earlier, with the pie chart. That's the faction, though, that wants Ray Tanner to go hire the equivalent of Ray Tanner 15, 20 years ago. That's what they want. And that they're concerned that Carolina maybe either can't or won't. And that's part of what we're going to ask John, by the way, coming up in just a bit. So I get it. Look, there's, what some might call safe, others might call, dare I say, lazy. You could make cases for both. And like I say, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves because I've been told, hey, just hold on here.
That it's not over.
Yeah, this is still very fluid. And again, we're going to talk to John Whittle about that level of fluidity here in just a second. But it's already just very interesting after some reports last night and having it kind of gain momentum and traction this morning to see what people, and there's a lot of people on Twitter today talking about this. And
Bonnie Lee's name was trending, actually.
Yeah, that's not always the greatest gauge.
Yeah,
but it's interesting. But I don't think, to be fair, and I'm serious about this, I don't really think it's about, at least for most people, it's about Monty Lee, the person, as much as what it may signal, what it may represent in the larger context. And I get that, and I think that's fair. Again, a lot of those people want Ray Tanner to go find Ray Tanner. That's what they want.
Or get him out of the status quo.
Yeah.
I think that's the big thing.
Yeah. May not be Ray Tanner. You're not going to get Dave Van Horn.
Right.
Dave Van Horn's not coming here. Yeah, right? But, who's as close as you can get us to that, Coach? That's what they want. We want to be that program again, not the program, as you told us, Elijah, that by statistical math and fact finished 10th in the Southeastern Conference.
Sometimes some refreshness is great. Sometimes you need, sometimes my hesitancy when seeing a coaching firing and there being some leftovers on the staff, it has nothing to do with those guys that are on the staff. It has something to do with, I guess, maybe some disproportionate blame about how the previous seasons have gone.
Yeah.
Like if Texas A&M were to have elevated Bobby Petrino when they fired Jimbo Fisher, it wouldn't make a ton of sense to me, because the offense was the problem there. That was one of the biggest problems. They couldn't score at all. To me, it's just one of those things, if you want to change the status quo, sometimes fresh looks from the outside oftentimes help you get those results. Sometimes if you don't, it might backfire.
Let's see where things stand with our good friend John Whittle of the Big Spur. He has been covering this very closely all week long, as all of you know, and he will join us with the latest as the postgame show continues.
Sometimes in coaching changes, you're trying to change the status quo to be able to better your program for the future. And Columbia's Secret for Weight Loss helped me change my status quo when it came to just the status of my weight. I was a little more overweight than I would like to be. I had a weight loss goal, and Paul Grant and Shaylin over at Columbia's Secret for Weight Loss helped me achieve just that. And one of my favorite things about what they do over at Columbia Secret for weight loss is that it's not using shots or pills or anything like that. A lot of it just comes from coaching, a diet plan that works for me, and being able to sustain healthier living habits, healthier eating habits. That was something I've never really been good at in my life because I like to eat almost anything that is in front of me, but they help me with that, with their coaching, with their program, because they're able to help you learn the secret of losing up to 1 pound of unhealthy fat per day and starting a success story. If that interests you, call 803-824-4210. Results may vary.
Welcome back into the Postgame Show on this Wednesday afternoon. Jay Phillips, Elijah Campbell with you. As promised, our very good friend John Whittle, the best in the business covering Carolina baseball, joins us now. He on the beat for the Big Spur. Always appreciate you, Mr. Whittle. The next head baseball coach at the University of South Carolina will be
Bill Gunter.
Oh, knew it. Knew it. Knew it was
That's why he's taking that Bahamas vacation
Yeah,
now.
he's not really on a cruise, is he? He's down there interviewing. Are you surprised by Elijah and I were just discussing, Monty Lee's name pops up as maybe being near the top of the list. Maybe it's an overreaction, John. And, I don't know where Tom Walter, Chris Pollard, Cliff Godwin might stand right now, but there seems to be a polarization if it goes in a certain direction. I don't know that I foresaw that, and I've been around this program a while. How are you looking at that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely reading the Big Spur message board, there's definitely some polarization. Or you can look at it as not very polarizing. It almost seems like folks are uniting against the idea. I don't see it as a disaster, but I understand why folks are very apprehensive about that. He went up to the rival school and had some success early and didn't have some success late and was let go. But it's I guess a little bit of a different situation around here. Monty Lee's a South Carolina guy. He's been in the program and knows what it takes to be successful around here. He's been part of a team that went to a super regional last year and underachieved a little bit this year, obviously. But he's been in it and knows the good and knows what needs to be fixed. So. I don't think it's as bad as some of the vocal folks out there are letting on.
Let's take a step back then with that answer is fresh in our memory. Where are we, John? I've been told, I imagine you have too, hold on. There's still a lot of work to be done here, and there are plenty of interviews that are going to take place. So where are we in this search? Has anyone been eliminated from the search?
Well, I mean, we're what time is it? A little after 4. We're 55 hours into this thing. Since Mark Kingston was relieved of his duties on Monday at 9 o'clock in the morning. We're early in this. I mean, I don't know if anybody's been necessarily eliminated. I know myself and others have put Kevin O'Sullivan's name out there. I don't think that one's gonna happen. For a multitude of reasons. I don't know that he's been eliminated necessarily. And, if Monty Lee were absolutely the guy, it'd be done by now. He's sitting over there in the office recruiting. He's got visitors coming on campus starting tomorrow from out of the transfer portal. Like they're trying to recruit and try to get players. And, if they were going to go ahead and make Monty Lee the head coach, they'd do it right now. So, there's still things going on besides the decision having been made. And, when you're 2 days removed from a firing, like it doesn't usually happen quite that fast. So, there's certainly some things going on.
Mm-hmm. And, John, you mentioned something that I think might be pretty vital when it comes to piecing together who might be the next South Carolina coach. And you mentioned recruiting. Monty hosting recruits this week. There's been certainly no shortage of support for Monty to get the job on Twitter with, players like Dalton Reeves or maybe someone like PJ Orlando, who is a signee. But how important is that with public support of either prospective players or current players? Is that to, I guess, becoming the head coach of South Carolina? Or how much is Ray and company kind of taking that into account?
Well, a little bit, but you also have to remember, like, players can leave very easily now. Like, if you're a recruit, you can decommit. I mean, even if you're a signee, you can get out of that NLI very easily. You can go into the transfer portal at any time. Like, those words mean something, but maybe not a whole heck of a lot. As bad as that may sound to some people, especially if you're a current player or a recruit. But I will say this, when you have so many players when you have so many past players, when you have so many current players, when you have so many future players who are all kind of united in that and sharing that same voice, then that's when it starts to mean a little bit more. So I do think it means something, but you can't keep a coach based on a few players or based on a few recruits or whatever else. That just can't be the thought process. This is a short-term game with current players and recruits for when you're making a long-term decision.
Talking to John Whittle of the Big Spur as we all follow the Carolina baseball coaching search. John, obviously finances matter. My question to you is, how much do financial concerns have to guide this search? And I guess what I really mean is, can South Carolina do, quote, whatever it takes to get their next head baseball coach?
I mean, South Carolina, I don't know that they can do whatever it takes for anything. I mean, this is the University of South Carolina. There's limited resources here. I mean, this isn't Texas A&M. Texas A&M can do whatever it takes. They can go give Jimbo Fisher a 100% guaranteed contract for 10 years or whatever it was to get him to leave Florida State, very shortly after winning a national championship. Like, that's whatever it takes. South Carolina, I don't think, can do whatever it takes really in anything, but, certainly in a sport that is very important, but also, doesn't exactly, fill the bank account. It's a break-even type of sport, but it's very important. So, I do think that South Carolina can go out there and make it work with with a bunch of different candidates. Now, they aren't going to pay Kevin O'Sullivan type of money to Skylar Meade, but if they want to get Kevin O'Sullivan, I don't know if they can make that one work. Florida would have to want to leave Florida, and Florida would want to have to let him go. But I think that they could probably pull that off. Can they pull off Cliff Godwin from East Carolina if he decided he wanted to come? Absolutely. Like, his buyout's not prohibitive. His salary's not prohibitive. I mean, if you start talking $2 million for a baseball coach and a $2 million buyout like you might have to have with Kevin Sullivan, then yeah, that's probably not going to work out. But, there are good options out there that South Carolina can easily make work, and I think they could probably make just about anything work as long as it's not too crazy.
Are Pollard and Walter as examples also of North Carolina-based coaches maybe in the middle of that range from what you're learning, John, in terms of if O'Sullivan's at the top as any type of even pipe dream candidate, where are Walter and Pollard in that mix?
Yeah, certainly reasonable candidates, both from a financial standpoint and a resume standpoint. Like, both of those guys have now, I will say that both of those guys have just redone contracts, and both of them are going to take some financial commitment. Like, it's going to take 7 figures worth of buyout to make some things happen. But you might be able to finagle some finances and make those things work. So, if those are the guys, if one of those guys is who Ray Tanner wants to go with, I do think that they can make that happen financially. So I don't think that money is prohibitive on either one of those guys particularly, but it's not those guys aren't easy slam dunks either. I mean, they'll have to get a little creative and make some things work out.
Last thing for you this time. I know we'll be talking to you again soon enough, I'm sure, sir. But you mentioned where we are now, just 2.5 days into this thing, basically. But what are you hearing about any potential time frame? Would they like to get this done and announce it during the Supers? Is a potential candidate still coaching? Where are we?
I don't know. I haven't heard of any potential candidates who are still out there, who are still playing, apart from maybe Kevin O'Sullivan. And I really don't think that's going to be the guy. So I think everybody else is done playing, whether that's good or bad. Y'all can discuss that next segment. Right. But I do think that I do think that Ray doesn't need a long timeline for this one. Now, if it's not done by this time next week, I would be surprised. I mean, I'm not necessarily going to put a 1 week time frame on him for it, but I don't see any reason why it should take any longer than it really a week. But I think it can get done a lot more quickly than that.
Always appreciate it, man, and we'll let you get back to it. I know you're busy. Thank you for the time today. John M. Whittle on Twitter, thebigspur.com for more of what John is following. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks as always.
Absolutely. Appreciate you guys.
All right, we'll recap some of what Mr. Whittle had to say when the postgame show continues. Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union, been telling you about them for a long time. They've been telling you about themselves since the 1930s. They're ready to help you with all your banking needs, and while they're doing it, they're going to save you some money because unlike the big banks, you pay lower rates and fewer fees. See, big banks, most of them pay shareholders. They're in it for the profit, and that's all well and good. It's America, but, Federal Credit Union like Palmetto Citizens, not for profit. So those monies are redistributed to the members, and that means that you can also count on the fact that it's all local, right? They're loaning to you, to your friends, to your neighbors, to the local businesses in your community. That's what Palmetto Citizens is all about. They've streamlined a lot of what they do. Check out palmettocitizens.org. You may be a current member, maybe hadn't been online in a while. A lot more online banking, a lot easier, a lot more modern, a lot more sleek, easy to use. Check it out, palmettocitizens.org. Whether it's checking, savings, any of your needs, check them out. See what we've done for you at Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union.
From the WIS Traffic Studios, I'm Elijah Campbell. A few accidents to get to you that are causing some issues on the roadways, and we have several, so we'll try to get to all of them here. We have one here in Richland County on I-26 westbound over the Columbia Avenue exit 91. An accident has the left lane completely blocked, so it is bumper-to-bumper stop-and-go traffic over there. We have an accident on Bush River Road at I-26 that's causing some mild delays, as well as some on I-26 eastbound between exit 91 and 97. We also have a disabled truck causing some delays on 26 westbound near the St. Andrews Road exit 106, as well as a couple on 77, one northbound at 12th Street and one southbound at Killian Road near exit 22.
Talking the Carolina baseball head coaching search. Thanks again to our good friend John Whittle for joining us in the last segment. We'll revisit some of that for you a little bit later on if you missed it. And, of course, Elijah will have all these up on the podcast page at 1075thegame.com or on the app, which you can get at the App Store or the Google Play Store. We encourage you to download that and follow along live or later. Either way, your choice. Both.
We all consume our radio and podcast differently.
Yeah.
big podcast guy. I love to listen to it, at my convenience.
I rarely listen to a podcast if they're like live once and then, it's up.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be like live show at. And I'm like, yeah. Especially once it start like 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, I'm not getting up for that.
Yeah. See, I big fan of the Dan Levitard show. Listened for years, and for a while when I was living.
Is that
in
the one with Stugatz?
With Stugatz, yeah, that's right. With John Wiener. In his show used to air around the same time mine did in Nashville, and I always have to catch it late. And I don't think I've actually ever watched that show live or listened to it live.
Yeah.
No, but I've always listened to the podcast for him.
I'm getting into more and more of them these days. I'm catching up with the modern world.
Slowly.
Yeah.
One day you're going to discover DVR at this rate.
Yeah, probably not.
You still
actually,
still using
VHS.
VHS to record
absolutely.
your live television?
Picture quality of VHS is still fantastic. Actually, I'm trying to find an old Betamax because it was better.
See, I had no experience with the Betamax. My dad definitely used to record some things on VHS tape, some like sporting events on VHS
Sony Betamax was like Sony's version and supposedly better, but it was smaller and not the industry standard. And finally, it just kind of went away. I think TV stations used a lot of Betamax for so-called better quality. Anyway, again, thanks to John Whittle for joining us. As John said, we're 2.25 days basically into this search.
55 hours, he said.
But that was great. Yeah, he did the math. I don't even want to try that. And again, Monty Lee's name seems to be emerging as a leading contender, and it's interesting. Like John said on their message boards, on theirs at the Big Spur, he said it's gone from sort of polarizing to almost now factions of fans unifying in some way against it with just a few that are for it. And it's not even any kind of fact. It hasn't happened, as he said, and he makes a great point. If it were going to happen, why not just go ahead and do it?
True. He's already there.
We asked John as well about, any financial things that would prohibit Carolina. And he's right. Listen, Kevin O'Sullivan, here's what's interesting about Kevin O'Sullivan. I say this in coaching searches all the time, whether it's here or anywhere else around the country. Timing is everything. I think you had a legitimate chance at Kevin O'Sullivan in 2017. I do. In fact, I know you had. I know that there was a legitimate chance at Kevin O'Sullivan in 2017. And you know what happened? His team kept winning.
He won a ring.
All the way to the College World Series championship.
He won a ring.
And at that point,
feels a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and at that point, whatever was ailing him, whatever things had maybe created some kind of rift at UF, it healed it all, right? It's like that scene in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade when Indy gets the holy water from the Holy Grail and pours it on Sean Connery with a bullet wound, and it just goes away.
Dissolved.
That's what winning in Omaha does for you. But
be amazed at the wounds that heals.
And last season, Kevin O'Sullivan went to the World Series final, lost to LSU, and this year they're in the Super. So it's just interesting how the timing is like, well, if there's a problem, because again, Kevin O'Sullivan's team this year 500, one game over. Lost their only game in the SEC tournament, but now here they are in the Supers. And, that's almost a 50-50 kind of thing. It may be in Clemson, but a lot of people are like, I think Florida's going to win that. We'll see. I mean, that's why you go play the game. Two former Jack Leggett assistants, by the way, that are coaching against one another.
Jack Leggett Bowl.
Yeah, it really is. Jack's proud. He'll be there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Should.
Yeah, I guess he'll pull for Clemson.
Yeah, some slight obligation.
Jack should come in with like a Maine jersey on from when he was, something like that.
Or one of those split jerseys.
But, are finances going to hinder this search? And I don't know the specific numbers for guys like Pollard or Walter or McDonald. If you're going to buy them out, like I said, I feel like with Louisville, if you really want Dan McDonald, and I've used his name a bunch through the years, you could probably work something out. Might be harder to to tell Wake Forest that you want Tom Walter and how to structure that, or Chris Pollard at Duke. But those guys may want the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
There are limitations. And, again, by all accounts, this is still seen as a premier destination job for college baseball coaches. And you will get the support and resources. You know, and Carolina's not going to stop supporting this thing. But as we said earlier, I think from some, whether it's spoken or unspoken, there's this feeling that if you were to make the Monty Lee move, it's really not about Monty. It could be assistant coach X, but that you might be signaling that's the best we can do.
An acceptance of where the program is at.
Yeah. Again, it's not really about Monty at that point.
Mm-hmm. And it might be different if Monty wasn't on the staff these last 2 years.
Yeah.
I sincerely believe that would go over a lot differently if he was never on the staffs of the last 2 seasons, especially this one where it got sour enough to want to move on from Mark.
Yeah. And we know he can recruit. And again, Monty's a great guy. So it's not about Monty, even though it is about Monty. And I know that's odd. It's sort of an oxymoron, but so I get it. One other name that has popped up, not from a coaching standpoint, but from a building this program around standpoint, is Ethan Petrie. And we didn't get a chance to ask John about that, but I did ask him this morning what he's heard about Ethan Petrie, because there's a lot of chatter that, Ethan's gone. Forget it. Ethan's going to, this school here or this school there. And I'm not going to name names because I don't think that's the responsible thing to do. But John said that he's been trying to gather some intel on that, and that's not a done deal either. I think from what John told me, Ethan likes it at Carolina, and like a lot of players would absolutely wait and speak with who comes in. You've got some time. The portal, I think, is open for a month. And again, all you got to do is put your name in within the month.
Yeah, you don't have to make a decision.
So he could technically, if he wanted to, he could go ahead and put his name in. Again, and putting your name in does not force one to leave your current school for another school. It just means you're out there and available to be contacted. Now, it may be wise to not put your name in until you've had a chance, perhaps, to meet with the new head coach, whoever that may be. So, but John did tell me today, that there's not, from Ethan Petrie and his family, there has not been a decision. But again, I've had a couple of people tell me, oh no, he's most definitely leaving. It's just a matter of where. So again, I don't know. I've not spoken with Ethan, but that was, again, John Whittle is as good as it gets when it comes to gathering information around that baseball team, and that's what he told me.
And personally, if I'm making the hire, that plays absolutely zero factor in whether or not I bring somebody in. As good as Ethan is, you're bringing somebody in who is going to be a builder anyway, or somebody who can bring in the talent to be able to replace an Ethan Petrie if Ethan Petrie were to leave. That you're going to have to be able to do that, and I agree with John. Even with the amount of support Monty's gotten with current players, prospective players, I'm not making the move because they gave that vote of confidence. As good as it is, and even if you do end up hiring Monty to be the head coach, or I guess maybe promoting him to being the head coach, it might make you feel a little better about that decision. But I don't think that should be the end-all, do-all, because the guys that we're talking about here, whether it be Pollard or McDonald, or Walter, those guys have proven track records of bringing in really good talent at schools that don't have the same pedigree that South Carolina does in the world of college baseball.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see when this dust all settles, how much stock Ray puts into that part of it all. There's so many moving parts here that maybe even if you move quickly to make the decision to relieve Mark of his duty, then you realize all the other things. Like I said, I don't want to sound naive, but here we are 2.5 days later or whatever, and some of the things that are happening around this, I didn't foresee. A whole variety of things, but it does prove what this fan base sees in this baseball program and what it wants it to be again, even if it's not, as John said, one of those big money makers. We'll be right back. There's a baseball search joke in here somewhere with this song. Welcome back into the Postgame Show. Jay and Elijah with you.
Nowadays, it's Can't You Hear Me Calling or texting.
That's a great song. Wish we could keep it playing, but that's the way bumps work. You got to let them go after a while. Poll question update. Elijah's been running a few of them here where it's like a tournament of our own when it comes to the poll questions this week.
We love brackets here, and we're doing our own South Carolina Gamecock baseball coaching candidacy bracket via Twitter poll. And yesterday we had one, and ECU coach Cliff Godwin was the winner of that poll, so we'll include him in the final one. And today, the three coaching candidates that we have presented: Chris Pollard from Duke, Dan McDonnell from Louisville, Josh Elander from Tennessee, as an assistant coach, Tennessee.
Right.
And with 358 votes in so far, Josh Elander barely ahead of Chris Pollard, 38.3%. Chris Pollard's at 37.4%, so we're at less than 1% in terms of distance between first and second. And Dan McDonnell, kind of like what Tom Walter was yesterday for Wake Forest, a distant third. He's at 24.3%. We still have 18 hours left on this bad boy, and it is pinned up to the top of our profile at 107.5 the game. So still plenty of time to participate and be able to put in your 2 cents on who would, I guess, advance into our final round of South Carolina coaching candidacy.
And again, here I am, knowing full well that Twitter polls are not scientific, but with a decent enough sample size, asking somewhat rhetorically, what makes an energized fan base that was desperate by and large to move on from their head coach want to go after a completely unproven assistant and have that person lead this particular poll relative to somebody who's been to the World Series 5 times, somebody who's been to somebody who's been to 3 Supers and won 2 ACC tournaments.
Simple. Modernization.
Yeah.
We just talked because we've been talking about Dan McDonnell and his recent lack of success at Louisville the last 2 years. And if the things that we've been hearing are true, that he's kind of reluctant to embrace things like NIL, transfer portal, the modern version of team building, then it might not be a coincidence that his 2 worst years came after the legalization of name, image, and likeness payments. There might be a correlation here. Someone like Elander, and out of all the names that we've thrown out, I would have Elander further down on my list. However, if you're going to go the assistant route, a guy who has had a very heavy hand in building Tennessee's roster and recruiting that roster, a roster that is the number 1 team in college baseball, was the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament, was the number 1 overall seed 2 years ago. And if you just look at, Omaha included, because they've gone twice in the last 3 years,
Should have gone the other time.
Should have gone the other time. Exactly. They should have three-peated in terms of going to Omaha.
Again, that was the only time in the history of the United States that America unified behind Notre Dame.
Notre Dame. Of all schools, Notre Dame. But they've been a juggernaut as of late. Plenty of trips to Omaha, and I've read a lot where Tony Vitello and a lot of people on that Tennessee staff credit Josh Elander for helping them build it and be a big part of the success they've had. A lot of the success they've had is the embracing of the modernization of how you roster build in all of college athletics. This is not just isolated to baseball, but to all college athletics. So when it comes to maybe what could re-energize a fan base like this one, seeing somebody who is a part of a staff that has really gone above and beyond in that type of roster building and has had that type of hand in that roster building can bring that element of freshness that you think you might not be getting with upgrading Monty Lee to being the head coach, or maybe a Dan McDonnell at a place like Louisville.
If you couldn't convince Dan McDonnell to handle a lot of that on his own and to focus more on baseball, could you not convince Dan McDonnell to hire, maybe not Josh Elander directly, but someone who is also doing what Josh is doing and bring them into a program like this? Like, allow Dan to be a baseball guy, or is that just too much to ask in terms of the head coach having control of his roster? Like, no. I want guys that are here 3 years.
I think it sounds great in theory, but in the SEC, to be a head coach, whether it be baseball, basketball, football, you're a CEO. You're a CEO, you're a public speaker, you're a politician, you're winning over the hearts and minds of everybody. And if you are just, if you find the modern state of college athletics abhorrent, then it's going to be a tough sell for you to be able to sell people to come to your program if you're holding your nose to bring in players from other schools and holding your nose at the fact that you might have to pay them a little bit of money for the work they do for you. It's just going to be a hard sell, in my opinion, for somebody to be able to do that, because those are the type of coaches, when you've been at a place for 18 years and had the success he's had, not a lot of people are telling him how to run his program.
No, well, and when you're averaging, one World Series every 3 whatever years, that's not so bad.
It can be easy to be set in your ways. I get it.
It's not so bad. Headlines of the day coming up. More on what the baseball search looks like. This is the Postgame Show.
From the WIS Traffic Studios, I'm Elijah Campbell. The few accidents to get to you that are causing some issues on the roadways this afternoon. We have one pretty big one that's got the right lane completely blocked on I-26 eastbound just before the Columbia Avenue exit. That is exit 91. We have some more minor accidents that are causing more minor delays. One on Alpine Road at I-20. Another one on Decker Boulevard over at Two Notch Road. One on 26 eastbound between Columbia Avenue, exit 91, and Broad River Road, exit 97. And on 26 westbound, there's an accident on Columbia Avenue, exit 91 as well. So some slow traffic both ways there on 26 East and West. Also have one on North Main Street at Wilkes Road and one more on Trenham Road over at Highway 12 near Forest Drive.
It is 5 o'clock news time on this Wednesday. Welcome back in. It's also the final hour of the postgame show. Alongside Elijah Campbell, I'm Jay Phillips. Appreciate you being with us. We've talked a lot of Carolina baseball today, so I'll start the headlines off by telling you nothing new to report when it comes to the coaching search itself. We had John Whittle on earlier today and asked him if anybody had been eliminated from the search. At this point, John said no. It's difficult to gauge exactly who is on Ray Tanner's list of candidates. Here's why it's difficult, because none of us have seen Ray Tanner's list of candidates.
It's like the ACC
Yeah,
grant
he
of
didn't
rights.
put it out. I don't know how he did. Yeah, exactly. You have to go to the office, look at it.
Put your phone up.
And yeah, once you see it, then they do the Men in Black thing to you. And you're,
Zoom.
yeah. So
Apparently, the only real footage that exists of the entire original Super Bowl I broadcast is that way.
yeah, I've heard that.
No, can't take your phone in there.
Yeah, I've heard that.
All you get to watch it with is, a pad, a notepad, and a pen.
Why not go ahead and put it out there and at least preserve it? Has it been digitized?
I don't think it has. I don't think I've ever seen the full length broadcast of Super Bowl I.
Well, I know this is not the news portion, but since you brought it up, isn't the story that because it was on two networks, but that both of them literally recorded over it for like soap operas?
Yep, they both taped over soap operas over them because the film was so expensive
Right.
that the execs at both, I think it was ABC and NBC, didn't think there would be more Super Bowls down the line, so they thought it'd be a better use of their time and money to record the soap operas that were broadcasting
Sure.
after that over the tape of the Super Bowl. And that is why there are so few, and by that I mean none at all, original recordings of the first ever Super
Well,
Bowl.
listen, man, fans of, General Hospital or Days of Our Lives or As the World Turns or whatever they are, man, they'll get you.
TV executives.
Are there still soap operas left?
Ones that don't have Stephen A. Smith on them, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. But it just goes to show, sometimes TV executives don't necessarily have the history of foresight.
Seriously, do they have soap operas gone away?
I think Days of Our Lives still airs.
Okay. And I know like Yellowstone is basically like a soap opera-ish type of thing, but I even think that's gone
Is it?
away, right? Like it's like a continuing drama.
Yeah.
It's not daily.
See, yeah, soap operas, to me, daily, and it has that very, glossy looking.
Yeah. Oh,
I
'cause
guess
it's all
picture
shot on a
quality.
soundstage somewhere in New York City. Yeah. Anyway.
I gotta call my grandmother. She knows. Watched them every day for years.
Sure. Oh, yeah. Oh, my grandma didn't miss them, man.
Appointment TV viewing.
Yeah. Yeah. They
Don't
made-
mess with Nanny when she's watching Days of Our Lives.
Oh, listen, one of our
I wouldn't dare.
we used to have a receptionist here, Miss Gracie, who for years she went into semi-retirement. She worked for years across the street at WIS at the television station, and she said, "Oh, on days when there could be like breaking news, like a special report, and the phones would blow up. Where are my stories?" Like I don't,
Because they'll cut into anything.
yeah,
with
I don't,
that.
I
They'll
don't
cut into
care if
anything.
there's a tornado. What's
I'm
happening?
missing valid
Yes.
plot points here.
Right. Where is Days of Our Life? And then she'd have to tell them, like, they're going to re-air it at 1 o'clock in the morning. That does me no good.
At all.
And then you miss a day. The good news is if you miss a day, you can catch right back up.
Yeah, that's the best part about the invention of DVR.
But she did. She said, like,
on-demand view.
yeah, but I think some of the folks that were calling, especially back in the day, that no DVR, no VCR even. It's like, my stories come on at 1. I need to see my stories. That's
I'm
what
not
she said they
messing
were
with
doing. Like,
stories.
where's my stories? Well, ma'am, yeah, there's a fire at a warehouse, and it's impacting traffic on the interstate, and we're having a special report. I didn't ask you that. I asked you where my stories were. She
There's
said she'd
major
get calls.
national breaking news.
She said she would get calls like that anytime, man. Could be whatever, or it's like there was a sporting event on instead. Like what the? I didn't ask for this. Anyway, so we'll get into more of our conversation. We'll get you a little clip from John coming up in just a few here on some of the things that he had to say, and we'll run over Elijah's poll question as we talk more about it. But no hiring imminent today with Carolina baseball. And yes, there seem to be a couple of mild surprise names that has risen near the top. We'll touch on all of those things for you coming up in just a little bit. To the NFL we go. Ryan Kelly is the Colts NFL player rep, and today he's done an interview kind of pushing back on Commissioner Roger Goodell's ultimate hope of an 18-game schedule, saying, quote, 18 games sounds great when Roger's saying it on Pat McAfee, but until you're the one that's going out there and putting the helmet on for 18 of those games, come talk to me. The commissioner did, I guess, right around the draft say we'd ultimately like to get there. Kelly's point is understandable. Quote, I wish people understood how hard it was to play 16. Then they added another one, and then they get rid of preseason games. Okay, who's that hurt? The guys that don't have a shot, the guys that are undrafted or late-round picks that need to go out and improve themselves. I think that fans see it like they don't watch the preseason, but they have no idea what goes on inside the building. He also discussed that the union has a little bit of an issue with what the NFL would like to do with camp. The NFLPA, the union, is proposing eliminating off-season workouts, your voluntary mini camps in the spring, your mandatory ones that are going on right now across most of the country. Instead, the union favors an earlier report date ahead of training camp and then a ramp-up period. He says, and his basic point was, all right, they have us come out for a couple of days. We run around. I'm paraphrasing now. We run around. We get hollered at by the coach, and then we leave. And then we come back and we do that again, and then we leave. And then we come back. We do it a third time, but that one's mandatory, and then we leave. And then we come back in July. Basically, I think what they're saying is, let's just come back in July, and let's do all those things. Not a bad idea.
Not at all.
Not a bad idea.
Well, almost sounds like it's going to have to be mandatory for them to do that if they do end up making the players union concede the 18th game.
Yeah,
because the NFL's been pretty good at making them do things they don't want to do in exchange for something really small, like not drug testing for pot.
Right.
That's usually how a lot of those negotiations end up going.
Maybe up a percentage point on the revenue share.
Yep.
That might help.
Yep. I certainly would. I mean, I understand what Ryan's saying.
I do too.
I totally get it.
I don't like an odd number. Either stay at 16 or go to 18, and he's right. I get it. We talked to Langston about that. The preseason game, especially for the big names, you play a few snaps. You play a couple of series. A young quarterback might play a little bit more than an older quarterback. And typically in the old days, by like the fourth preseason game, starters maybe played a quarter and a half.
Yeah. I was going to say,
back when I was a little younger, you might see them for like a half of the final game. Like, all right, because boys, we're playing next week, so let's, But then it was the third teamers and the final cuts and whatever else. Yeah, now, no, I'm with you. Now it's the third preseason game, and they're maybe playing a quarter.
Yeah. The dress rehearsal
because you can't risk getting hurt. I get it.
Guys are bigger, faster, stronger now. That risk of injury is higher now than it has ever been in the history of the league.
But you do have to get them in shape. And again, he's right. You do have to have these guys that need a shot to go play in some live action, which, again, I come back around to the need for a real NFL minor league. But that's not a drum I'm going to bang today. But I'm getting really good at playing that drum.
The web is getting really big at reasons as to why, and the road leading back to, some type of development. I get it.
Women's college basketball news for you as we continue our integrated media headlines of the day. This came out last night. Gino Auriemma signed a 5-year contract extension to remain at UConn. He's won 11 national championships this coming season. Do you know the answer to this? This coming season will be Gino's blank season at Connecticut?
I'm going to do some really quick math on air, which is a terrible idea. This will be his 45th season.
Well, it's his 40th, but when he's done, he will have done 45.
At the end of this contract?
Yeah. 40 years. This is Jim Boeheim stuff, man.
This is. It absolutely is.
He says, I still find it hard to believe I've been at UConn for over half my life. I feel like there's so much more that can be done and will be done. I'm excited to be the one to do it with my staff and my team. I'm probably as excited about these next few years as I've ever been over the last 40. The extension runs through the 29 season. It's valued at a total of $18.7 million, includes opportunities for additional compensation. His base is $400,000 per year. He earns compensation for speaking, consulting, media. That goes to $2.94 million. It increases by $200,000 each year thereafter. UConn just made its 23rd Final Four appearance, 15th in the last 16 years, and he is set to become college basketball's winningest coach this season. 1,213 career wins, just 3 behind Tara Vanderveer, who set the record last year. That's about in line. I think Dawn makes just a touch more.
Yeah, so good for him. He makes Dawn Staley money.
Yeah,
good job.
That's right.
Good job. Good job, Gino. Yeah.
And
high five.
Speaking of Dawn Staley, if you didn't see this, Sakima Walker is returning for her final season in Columbia. The 6'5" forward came from Northwest Florida as a JUCO transfer. One more, she said. She made one start last season, averaged about 7 minutes per game for South Carolina last year, but they wanted her back. She wants to come back. And, again, it'll be interesting to see how the big rotation works.
It's a logjam
without Camilla.
But I do like Sakima coming back for the sole reason that when Dawn would refer to the locker room as a daycare, that Sakima was oftentimes the one referred to as like the mother figure,
right,
in terms of making sure, everybody's
you got rambunctious kids, you need a mom.
And I think Sakima, from what I gathered, played that role a little bit.
Yeah.
And that sounded like it was a necessary role.
Yeah.
So
I wonder if that's Dawn doing that. Like, hey, please don't leave yet.
I need you.
Yeah.
Looked at the locker room.
Well, I think of some of the things Dawn was saying last year, like, I don't even know what they're talking about. I don't know what any of that means. And I'm with Dawn. Dawn and I were born in the same year. I'm with you, Coach.
There's probably some lingo I throw around where you're like, can you say that again in English?
My girls will laugh. I forget what that was the other day. And I looked at them like a confused dog. When your dog does his head, like, what? I'm like, what? And they're just looking like, Dad. I was like, thanks. You just move on. So
you do the thing when someone's talking to you in public, but you can't hear what they're saying because it might be a little loud. But you're tired of asking or saying what? What? Can you say it again? So it gets to the point where you're just nodding. Yeah.
I've done that a few times. But Sakima Walker will be back. Finally, the Atlanta Braves played the Red Sox today, and it was a close one. It's a close one. Braves lose 9-0.
Very close. They were one swing away.
Braves are now 7.5 back in the East. When do I worry?
Whenever they're not in the playoff picture.
Okay.
The thing that you shouldn't be looking at now is the NL East, right? I think the thing that the standings that I would be more concerned with is the NL wildcard standings. Because I think you might end up having to concede the division title this year because the Phillies are just that good.
Good news.
And healthy.
Good news for that then. So thank you for that. The good news is the Braves are 5 games up on the Cubs for that. So they're fine. They're in good shape. Or actually, I guess it's 5 games up on the Cardinals, right? Because 3 teams make it, yeah? Mm-hmm. Braves, Padres, Cubs. So Atlanta is in okay shape for the wild card. That's the Integrated Media headlines of the day, brought to you by Integrated Media, 803-948-8327. All your home theater, home security needs, outdoor systems. This time of year, it's great. It's really great all year long. I know it gets a little hotter in the summer, but enjoy the ball games, your favorite concerts, shows, movies, out on the deck, the patio. and a lot more affordable than you might think. You say, Jay, I don't, that's all. No, it's not. Call them up. See what they can do for you. No job too big. No job too small. Our very good friends at Integrated Media. Back into the Gamecock head baseball coach discussion as the postgame show continues. 19 minutes after 5 o'clock on this Wednesday. Welcome back into the Postgame Show. Jay Phillips and Elijah Campbell with you. Appreciate you being with us. Continuing what we've been doing the last few days, primarily focusing on South Carolina's search for a new head baseball coach. Nothing new to report today, but we did speak to our good friend John Whittle earlier. Ryan McGee was on with us as well of ESPN. Ryan covers a lot of college baseball for ESPN. One of the things, and I'll get Elijah to get to the poll question here in just a second, it does feel like, 3 of the leading candidates are all coaching in North Carolina right now, convenient from a geographical standpoint, and in fact that they've maybe been recruiting this area, those 3 being in no particular order: Tom Walter at Wake, Chris Pollard at Duke, Cliff Godwin at East Carolina, Dan McDonnell in the mix, Josh Elander in the mix at Tennessee, the top assistant to Tony Vitello. And Monty Lee's name is emerging. It seems to be moving up the ranks. And Monty's name alone, as we talked with John, and we've talked amongst ourselves today and heard from some of you, it's interesting. John said on the message boards at the Big Spur, and we're seeing it on Twitter as well, there's a polarization. That was the word you used with me earlier, Elijah, when we were prepping the show today. And let me say again what I think of that, because I'll be honest with you. I didn't really, believe that Monty was going to emerge as a candidate. I mean, Sunday and Monday, what I was hearing is that Monty's about to go to the Citadel. But if they fire Mark, Monty's going to be the quick interim, probably.
Right.
And he was, because, you got to have somebody doing it. I mean, again, somebody has to hold the job. But the reason that I think it's polarizing, really, and this is my opinion, isn't about Monty himself. Some of it is, because some of you are saying, and again, you make a fair point. South Carolina's going to hire the guy that the rival fired 2 years ago, and within 2 years, the guy's replacement gets them back to the Supers. And also, to one of the points you've made, Elijah, you're going to hire the top assistant off the staff of the guy you just fired. Make it make sense is what a lot of Gamecock fans are saying. And it's difficult. But at the same time, Monty does have a track record as a great recruiter. People like him. Again, that's why I say it's not about Monty like the guy. And Monty is a good baseball coach. But he doesn't necessarily have the resume that some others have. At Charleston, he made 1 super. It was a hell of a super. And they also got jobbed against Coastal in the playoffs a couple of years prior. So he had some good teams at Charleston. He did. And again, that super they played in Lubbock, that was a tough one, man. That was a good job. But at Clemson, it regressed. They went to the regionals a bunch. They hosted a bunch. They didn't get out of them. And in the last couple of years, they didn't make it. So when you look at Monty's total body of work, I get it. But the point when I say it's not just about Monty and what he's done, it to me could signal in fans' minds, they might see it as a resignation of sorts from the university, from Ray Tanner, like, this is just the best we can do. And what those fans want is to see Ray Tanner go hire another Ray Tanner. And obviously, Ray Tanner is not directly coming back into this job. And I don't think Ray, 12 years removed, would be like, oh, yeah, I'll go put the uniform back on. So that ain't happening. Ray Tanner ain't walking through that door.
A lot has changed since Ray Tanner walked through that door.
But they want Ray Tanner to go back and hire somebody who was the version of Ray Tanner somewhere between 2000 and 2012. That's what they want. And they know that person is out there somewhere.
Right.
Now, you may not get that exact guy, right? You may not get a guy who's been to 6 World Series. Dan McDonnell's been to 5.
Almost as many as you have as a program in your history.
You look at it from that perspective, and there's a lot to like about who you could go get. But do finances get in the way? And that's another thing. Is like, unlike the hiring of Shane Beamer, unlike the hiring of Lamont Paris, your programs in those 2 sports are not seen nationally the way your baseball program is. Nor are they necessarily seen. They are hoped for, by your fan base to become really good. And, you know, fans would love to see, you know, Shane replicate what Steve Spurrier did for a few years. Fans would love to see Lamont go have a year like Frank did at the Final Four, or Eddie winning the SEC championship. But in baseball, you have seen those things happen, and you've seen generational success in the baseball program. And it's something that you can hang your hat on, no pun intended, in a way that you can't with any other sport. Dawn Staley notwithstanding, because Dawn has turned Dawn's program into what it is. Again, you had pockets of success in women's basketball, but there was a lot of ebb and flow and a lot of coaching change. Dawn is Dawn, and what she has built is, quite honestly, in my opinion, beyond remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
But that's Dawn's Dawn, man.
It's an outlier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just, Dawn, you go do your thing. But baseball, fans are like, no, that's our sport. We can be good at that. And like John said, it's not really a moneymaker, but fans don't care. And I think the universities around the country that support baseball understand that. There's only a couple of schools that even make any kind of money. Even mighty Texas and LSU, even if they turn a profit in baseball, it isn't like they're completely self-funding, right? Like, I mean,
the football money has a lot to do with the facilities upgrades and things of that nature.
Like, it's just really hard if you're going to spend that kind of money. That's what Carolina fans want to see. Well, spend it then, is what they're saying. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think there's a pushback like there is if a guy like Monty Lee is genuinely one of, say, a list of 3 or 4. But I asked you earlier about Josh Elander. Why is Josh Elander gaining traction as Tennessee's top assistant? Are you really going to go out and hire a top assistant? If you, what happened to the notion of an Omaha coach, or at least in the case of a Chris Pollard or a Cliff Godwin, dudes that have been to multiple super regionals? And in Pollard's case at Duke, he's won 2 ACC tournaments. So you know he's got good tournament coaching chops.
Which is a big element of the guy you're going to have to get next, because that's the thing you fell short on the last few years is tournament success.
So, there's this feeling that somehow the ship is going to sail away and Carolina fans are going to be left on the dock with baseball too, if this hire isn't one that, again, brings them back to what they wanted from, I'm just going to say, 15 years ago, as it was being built again. Because there was a little dip now, but the dip is relative. And let's face it, the dip is relative right now. You went to the tournament again. In the 12 years since Ray Tanner has left, you've missed the tournament 4 times, which is kind of hard to believe, actually. All right? And I might even say only 4 times, or, wow, you missed it 4 times? Like, I don't know which. It depends on your point of view. I would say that you shouldn't ever miss the tournament here.
This is the type of place, yeah.
And so that's why, but even this year, let's face it, Mark made the tournament the last 2 seasons. They hosted last season, and up until 5 weeks ago, they were in position to host this year. And then the
manner in which it fell apart is what,
again, the wheels fell off.
A lot of people
and when you put them
way.
back on, it was like that scene in Vacation, 4 bald tires and a toe, and they're just all wobbly. And the family truckster's trying its best to get to Wally World, man, but at least the Griswolds made it. The Gamecocks did not.
I think the biggest element, too, is the timing of this. In terms of college coaching searches, a lot of times you're competing with other big-time programs that have storied histories for your coaching vacancy, and you might be fighting it out with a rival in a bidding war to get a coach that you want. But in terms of teams that have separated from their coaches, you're the biggest job opening in college baseball right now.
Not even close.
And there's not a close second.
Seriously, as we speak, is Coastal the second best available job? Because they have a national title.
It really well could.
Now think about that, right?
Yeah.
And I mean that in a good way. Think about that.
Yeah.
You are competing with Coastal,
and
you're not.
You're far and away the biggest opening right now. So it does feel like the chance to get the next closest thing that you can to prime Ray Tanner is right now, just because of competition's sake.
You got the pick.
Yeah, you're picking the litter.
Yeah.
You can call anybody.
Yeah.
And the call will be taken, And I think that's why I guess let me rephrase this. That's why the notion of Monty Lee possibly getting upgraded to being the head coach does maybe rub a lot of Gamecock fans the wrong way, or maybe turns off some of your more pessimistic fans, because they do feel the opening you have right now is very exploitable.
Yeah, and that, again, whether it was Monty Lee or some dude named Jimmy Jimerson, you can do better than that, even if he is a good dude. More on this, plus the drive around the SEC. Got some CFP times for you coming up.
From the WIS Traffic Studios, I'm Elijah Campbell. The few accidents to report to you that are causing some issues on the roadways this afternoon. We'll start with one that's been causing some issues for about the last hour or so, and that's an accident that's got the right lane completely blocked on I-26 eastbound just before the Columbia Avenue exit 91. It's almost at a standstill over there, it looks like. We got some more to get to you. One on Alpine Road at I-20, another one on Decker Boulevard at Two Notch Road, one that's recently been reported at Hardin Street at Highway 12 near Taylor Street. We also have one on Highway 1 at Augusta Road at North Grampian Hills Road. And lastly, we have one on I-77 northbound just after the Fort Jackson Boulevard exit 10.
It is Drive Around the SEC time. Continuing our discussion, though, of Carolina baseball's search for a new head coach. And I want Elijah to get to the poll question. We'll come back around to that. Let me get into a couple of things because I figure a few SEC teams will be involved. So I've been holding on to this story for you. At the first year of the 12-team college football playoff starts later this year. And today, ESPN announced the kick times for those games. The 4 first-round games will be on December 20th and 21st. ABC and ESPN will televise those games Friday and Saturday night, 8 p.m. kickoff times. TNT will have the December 21st afternoon games at 12 and 4. Here's the bad news. Those afternoon games will go up against the Chiefs versus the Texans at 1. And wait for it, Elijah. If this was it's cool that this is actually one of the lesser rivalry matchups in the NFL. They're going up against the Ravens and the Steelers.
Ooh.
At 4:30.
Good luck.
You know, Ravens, Steelers. It doesn't have the juice of like Seahawks, Cardinals, but it's close.
A smidge. Yeah, no, it's no Jags, Texans, but I guess it'll do.
Texans, Chiefs at 1 o'clock. It's the Chiefs. It's Patrick Mahomes. It's Taylor Swift's boyfriend,
You about called him Patrick Mahomes. Now that's a juicy rumor.
Travis Kelce. Sorry.
That's a juicy rumor.
Depending on which game, and here's the thing. How do we determine what games TNT gets? Is Disney going to go, all right, you can have the
one, the group of five
team,
which this past year would have been like Oregon and Liberty.
But I'm here to tell you, and I love me some college football, I promise. But the college football game isn't going to beat the Ravens-Steelers game, man.
There have been so many examples over history of entities that have tried competing with the NFL on certain days.
That Ravens-Steelers game is going to have, what, 30-something million, maybe close to 40 million people watching.
Well, probably end up being one of the top 50 most watched events in the country.
Yeah.
Which are all sporting events.
It won't get quite playoff numbers, but it could depend on. I mean, what if they're both fighting for the AFC North at that point, which they probably will be.
They could if Russell Wilson
a loaded
or
division,
Justin Fields.
Man. Yeah, it's a loaded division. But I don't care. You know who's playing for whom. That's become one of the premier rivalries in sports in this country.
Certainly.
So, Fox is president for, I love this, for Insights and Analytics. Is that the same as like the NCAA Committee on Smiles and Sunshine?
The very real Smiles and Sunshine Committee.
The guy's name is Mike Mulvihill, works for Fox. Quote, I think it will be fine for the NFL and college football to coexist on that date. I think both events will rate just fine. They probably will. So I'm not here to say, like, don't do it. But I kind of am. But I also don't want games on Tuesdays and Wednesdays and stuff, which I think is, industry term.
Only the MAC deserves the Tuesday and Wednesday games.
The 4 first-round games will be played on campus. They'll be announced December the 8th. The quarterfinals, semifinals will all be on ESPN. Of course, the championship as well. The quarterfinals will be on New Year's Eve. Fiesta Bowl at 7:30. Well, they'll begin on New Year's Eve with the Fiesta Bowl at 7:30. New Year's Day, Peach Bowl at 1. Rose Bowl at 2 o'clock Pacific time. Didn't see that one coming. And the Sugar Bowl will be at 8:45. The semifinals are the Orange and Cotton on January 9 and 10. The championship will not take place until January the 20th. It will also this year be in Atlanta.
That's going to be a weird shock having college football be played that deep into January.
Yeah. Tomorrow, by the way, ESPN is announcing pretty much when every bowl game will be played. And I think here within the next couple of weeks, we know the entire season, which I will say is a godsend for college football fans. I hated, and I had to work it too. And this is not me like complaining about my job, but like one of the things that I've lamented most as a dad while doing what I do for a living, I loved doing 17 seasons of Gamecock football on Saturdays. I did. especially as a little kid who grew up here. Like, tell little Jay Phillips, he gets to do 17 years of being around that team every Saturday in a professional capacity. But I could never, coach youth soccer for my girls because I didn't know when I was going to work. And they don't tell you until, 10 days out, 12 days out, whatever. And twice a year, they used to get the 6-day window. So I was like, I can't commit to it because I might have to work at 9. I might not work until 3. I don't know.
You might be done by 4.
Yeah, I don't know. And so I never could. But now we'll at least know when games are going to be played. That's part of the new structure. That's the schools finally push back a little bit. So I'm glad for that.
It's about time.
Yeah, but there you go. All right, talking a lot more about the Gamecock baseball situation, and I want to be fair to that conversation. Like we told y'all in the last segment, for those of you just tuning in, and Monty Lee's name has risen up. Again, it's not really about Monty. It's in a lot of fans' minds. You can feel it. It's what they would view as, again, a raising of a white flag almost. Like, this is just the best we could do, and they don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that. They want this program to be back to what it was. And it's not that maybe somebody that you've never heard of or somebody like Monty couldn't get it done, but to your point, Elijah, and I think it's a terrific point. You are the only elite job looking for a coach in the summer of 2024. I do think now, because you made a point the other day, Texas is a little unhappy, but I think if Texas were going to do it, now they'd have done it too, to announce to the world, we're looking for a coach.
Season's been over for like 3 days.
Yeah, and they haven't. And again, that's somebody who's been to the World Series 3 times in 8 years. That's not enough for Texas.
But he might be afforded a little bit of grace and leeway because they have that history.
But for Carolina fans, they're basically, like you said, you can have the pick of the litter here. Now, for some of these guys, the finances are such that they're unattainable. Like John Whittle mentioned to us, it might cost $2 million to get Kevin O'Sullivan out of his job, and then you got to pay him $2 million. And you're probably not doing that. But Kevin O'Sullivan isn't leaving Florida anyway.
That ship has probably sailed.
Again, you could have, you had a legit shot at Kevin 7 years ago, and then Kevin had to delay his meetings with you because, he won the College World Series. And at that point, it was done, and you hired Mark Kingston, and here we are. So this time around, can you go get Tom Walter out of Wake Forest? Don't know what his buyout is. I was told this morning that maybe some of those conversations have been had, and maybe that one is just a little too cost prohibitive. You've got to let money factor in here at some point. But how much can you spend? How much can you work with the new candidate or his school to get some of this done? What's the buyout situation like for Chris Pollard? For what we're told, if it's Cliff Godwin at ECU, look, you can pay him. He makes $600,000. You could pay Cliff $850,000. I'm just throwing that out there. It might take more. It might take $1 million.
It could.
But a $250,000 raise plus the resources of USC baseball and the allure of the Southeastern Conference might be enough. And you're going to have more NIL money here. And that dude can win, man. He's a really good coach. And one of the things that we talked about with Ryan McGee, he shares such not a symbiotic relationship with Ray Tanner, but Ray Tanner, a born and bred North Carolinian, played baseball at NC State, assistant coach at NC State, head coach at NC State, multiple degrees from NC State. Godwin had all that at ECU, player, assistant, head coach, 2 degrees from there.
They can share. There's a nice rapport.
Ray can say, you know what, Columbia is a good place to live. And you can always go see the folks whenever you feel like it. It's right up the road. Get into a couple of phone calls when the postgame show comes back. Welcome back in. Final few minutes of the post-game show on this Wednesday. Jay and Elijah with you. Get into a couple of phone calls here in just a second. Just looked it up. David Pierce at Texas, 3-time Big 12 conference champions, 3 times in the College World Series, 1 other trip to the Super Regional, 2 other times to the playoffs. 1 season was COVID, and 1 year they did not make the tournament. Surprised that didn't get him fired, and I'm kidding, but it was because the year prior they had gone to the College World Series. Again, sometimes stuff happens, and you just don't make it.
Sometimes bad years happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's sports. Yeah. Sometimes you lose. What does Crash Davis say? Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, sometimes it rains.
Giannis said after last season, whenever they got ousted by Miami, that press conference, very good life advice. He says sometimes you don't get the promotion at the end of the year for your job. Sometimes you don't achieve your goal. That happens.
Ryan McGee also gave us a bit of wisdom today. Comparison is the thief of joy.
One of my favorite quotes. I love it.
Talking today about how Carolina fans are just looking around and again, the SEC of 15 years ago is not today's SEC. Again, this year's SEC set a record, 11 schools to the NCAA tournament, and Oklahoma and Texas made it.
Which means next year, 13 of the 16 schools in the conference.
And Auburn makes it a lot. They just didn't this year. Mississippi won the national title a couple of years ago. They didn't make it this year. Sometimes you don't make it. It's hard.
In a league like this?
Ronnie up on the Love Chevy phone lines. Ronnie, good afternoon. How are you?
Good afternoon to you, gentlemen. I just wanted to speak a little bit about the coaching search, if I might.
Please.
Yes, I graduated from Carolina School of Law, but before that, I graduated from Clemson. That was my undergrad degree, and I'm a Tiger. But more than that, baseball is everything to me when it comes to sports. I mean, it's more important to me than football, way more important than basketball. Baseball is it. And, we had one heck of a coach. I mean, we knew we had an amazing coach when we had Jack Leggett. And Ray Tanner was the bane of our existence. I mean, I can tell you for sure, Jack Leggett would have at least 1 national title under his belt if it had not been for Ray Tanner. Ray Tanner was an amazing baseball coach, just probably the best baseball coach in my lifetime, and that's taken into account the guy that died recently that was at Florida State, all the guys that have done the job. Ray Tanner's first and best skill and gift and talent is being in a dugout of a college baseball team. No one is really bringing this up because, okay, now he's AD. I get that. And I'm not saying anything negative or positive about what he has done, might do in the future as an AD. I'm sure he's doing a very fine job. But like I say, if you're doing anything other than what you were put on this earth to do, it's a waste of talent and a waste of space. In my humble opinion, number one, Monty Lee is not the answer. I mean, you don't trade in a decent running Ford F-150 for a decent running, Chevrolet, half-ton pickup truck. Right. What Carolina needs is a Ferrari, and it's time for Carolina to hire somebody that is a Ferrari, not a replacement. There's no need to fire Kingston if you're going after Monty Lee. But why has no one suggested that Ray Tanner just get back in the dugout? He could be the next Bear. He could be the Bear Bryant of college baseball, the Bear Bryant, or I guess Nick Saban of college baseball. In my opinion, that's where he belongs.
Yeah, thank you, Ronnie, for the phone call. It's a fair question. Look, Coach Tanner doesn't want to do it again. I think if he really wanted to, he could. A lot has changed, but it hasn't changed as if Ray has, been in retirement in Montana or something. He's here running a Southeastern Conference athletics department. So as the landscape has changed, he's been rolling right along with it. He doesn't want to do it anymore. Somebody suggested that to me the other day. We were talking about Dave Van Horn. And I remember Dave Van Horn, when Carolina beat Nebraska in 2002, Dave Van Horn had worked his butt off to get Nebraska to the College World Series. And Arkansas snapped him up, man. And it did just like that. And Dave's been there ever since. He's finally got his title. He's won the SEC a few times. This year they should have advanced. Their fans are like, oh, dadgummit, Dave.
OVC.
That could be Ray Tanner, right? That could be Ray Tanner. Jim Schlossnagle at A&M has been doing it for a long time. Tim Corbin's now been doing it for a long time. That could be Ray Tanner. Ray Tanner didn't want to do it. Ray Tanner wanted to be the athletics director. And whenever he was ready to retire, he had told people here, I want to be the AD. And they all said, cool. And now it's been, 12, 13 years that Ray's been the athletics director. I don't disagree with you, Ronnie, in the sense that he is one of the finest to ever do it. The facts, that this can be an opinion thing on where you rank them, but the facts alone tell you that he is amongst the discussion of the best to ever do it. And he was doing it at a time when a lot more schools were taking it seriously. And that's why a lot of people want him to go get that guy. Go get you, coach. It won't be you, but go get you.
Get someone that reflects the seriousness of the program that you built.
But Ronnie's right. If you're going to trade one for the same, it's just trading for something different. That's why fans feel a little disappointed if that's where it goes. But that's not to say that's where it's going to be. We'll talk more about it tomorrow. See y'all.